Picture the sun rising over the vast, tranquil waters of the Nile River. The early morning mist swirls just above the surface, creating an ethereal scene of peace and serenity. Suddenly, the stillness is broken by the sound of a baby's cry, faint but unmistakable. Along the riverbank, a young Egyptian princess notices a basket hidden among the reeds. Her heart skips a beat as she calls for her maidservant to retrieve it. As the basket is brought to her, she feels an overwhelming sense of compassion. Little does she know, the child inside will change the course of history. This moment, so small and seemingly insignificant, is the beginning of a story that would impact an entire nation. Bithiah, the daughter of Pharaoh, faced a choice that day. A choice between obedience to her father's brutal decree or the whisper of something greater calling her to act in defiance. Her decision to save this Hebrew baby would forever alter her life, the life of the child, and the fate of the Hebrew people. And just like Bithiah, we all face moments where our choices can shape the future in ways we can't yet imagine. Are you ready to see how the courage of one woman helped shape the destiny of God's chosen people? Bithiah was no ordinary woman. She was a princess in one of the most powerful empires the world had ever seen, Egypt. Being the daughter of Pharaoh, her life was filled with privilege, wealth, and influence. She lived in the grandeur of Egyptian palaces, surrounded by the best education, art, and culture the ancient world had to offer. Yet, despite her royal status, there was something different about Bithiah. Her story would soon unfold to show that she was not just defined by her lineage but by her heart. As a member of the royal family, Bithiah had access to everything, yet the pressures of living under the expectations of royalty were immense. Pharaoh, her father, was viewed as a god by the Egyptians, and the entire nation revolved around maintaining this image of divine rule. Bithiah was expected to uphold these traditions and values, but deep inside, there was a yearning for something more, something beyond the rigid confines of Egyptian customs. In the royal court, Bithiah would have been exposed to the politics and religious practices of the time. She knew the power her father wielded and the fear that his decrees instilled in the people. But unlike her father, who saw himself as a god, Bithiah began to question the beliefs that surrounded her. What was it like to live as a ruler yet feel distant from the divine power you were supposed to represent? Bithiah's life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. Growing up as a royal, Bithiah would have been well-versed in Egyptian myths, stories of gods and goddesses, and the intricate rituals that governed daily life. Yet, these teachings didn't seem to answer the deeper questions stirring in her heart. Her compassion and empathy set her apart from many others in her family. Little did she know that these very traits would soon lead her to make one of the most critical decisions of her life. Bithiah's royal upbringing prepared her to navigate the complex social and political landscape of Egypt. However, her destiny was not merely to follow in the footsteps of her father. She was about to play a pivotal role in one of the greatest stories ever told, the deliverance of an entire nation. It all began with an unexpected discovery by the riverbanks of the Nile, which would forever change her life. One fateful day, Bithiah made her way to the Nile River, a place where many would go to bathe and worship the gods of Egypt. But what she discovered that day was far from ordinary. As she approached the river, a faint cry caught her attention. Her eyes were drawn to a small basket floating among the reeds. Curious, and perhaps guided by a sense of compassion, she ordered one of her maidservants to bring the basket to her. Little did she know that this small, fragile baby inside would change the course of history. Upon opening the basket, Bithiah was met with the sight of a Hebrew infant, wrapped in cloth, his tiny face full of innocence. It was no coincidence that this child was placed in the Nile, the very river that Pharaoh had commanded would be the grave for every male Hebrew child. But instead of following her father's ruthless decree, Bithiah felt an overwhelming sense of love and protection for the child. She knew in that moment that she couldn't let him die. The discovery of this baby would have put Bithiah in a precarious position. Defying her father's orders was dangerous, and keeping the child could bring severe consequences. But Bithiah's compassion outweighed her fear. She decided to save the infant, fully aware of the risks involved. There was something about this child that stirred her heart, a divine purpose perhaps, though she could not fully understand it yet. Bithiah immediately understood that this child was a Hebrew, one of the oppressed people living in her father's kingdom. But rather than turning the baby over to the authorities, she chose to keep him. The irony of this moment is striking. A Hebrew baby, saved by an Egyptian princess, in direct defiance of Pharaoh's orders. This bold decision set in motion a series of events that would alter not only the child's life but the fate of the Hebrew people. As she held the baby in her arms, Bithiah likely pondered what kind of future awaited this helpless infant. She had no idea that this child, whom she named Moses, would grow up to lead an exodus of his people, freeing them from the very empire her family ruled over. At that moment, all she knew was that she couldn't let him go. This was no ordinary child, and Bithiah was no ordinary princess. Her decision to take him in was the beginning of a journey that would intertwine her fate with one of the greatest leaders in biblical history. If you're enjoying this story so far, comment the word courage below. I have a special blessing for you at the end of the video. Bithiah's decision to take Moses as her own was not just a moment of compassion. It was an act of extraordinary courage. In defying Pharaoh's decree, she risked everything: her position, her status, and even her life. Egypt was a land governed by strict rules, and Pharaoh's word was law. To go against it was to challenge the very authority of the kingdom. Yet Bithiah felt an undeniable pull in her heart to protect this innocent life, no matter the cost. The courage it took for Bithiah to adopt Moses cannot be understated. In a world where power and obedience to Pharaoh were paramount, she made a choice that could have easily been her downfall. But Bithiah wasn't driven by fear. Instead, she was motivated by a deep sense of justice and compassion. It's as though she sensed that this child was destined for something greater, even though she couldn't see the full picture yet. Bithiah could have easily handed Moses over to the authorities, and her life would have continued without disruption. But she didn't. She acted against the norms and values of her time, showing that true courage often means standing up for what is right, even when it's dangerous. Bithiah chose love over fear, and in doing so, she became part of a much larger plan that would unfold through Moses' life. Her bravery is a powerful reminder that sometimes the most impactful decisions come at the greatest personal risk. For years, Bithiah kept Moses hidden in plain sight, raising him in the very palace of the Pharaoh who sought to kill him. It's incredible to think that Moses, the future leader of the Hebrews, was brought up with the best education, the finest foods, and the luxuries of Egyptian royalty, all because of Bithiah's decision. She not only gave Moses life, she gave him the tools he would one day need to lead his people to freedom. Bithiah's story challenges us today to examine our own lives. What decisions are we facing that require courage? Are there moments where we know what is right, but fear holds us back? Bithiah's example shows that courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act in spite of it. Her faith in doing what was right, even at great risk, set the stage for one of the most important stories in the Bible. Raising Moses as her own son was a decision that required Bithiah to fully embrace her role as a mother, despite knowing the child's true origins. She didn't treat him differently because of his Hebrew background. Instead, she loved him unconditionally. Moses grew up in the royal palace, surrounded by wealth and luxury, and Bithiah ensured that he received the best education Egypt had to offer. This was crucial, as Moses would later use the knowledge he gained to lead the Israelites in ways he couldn't have without this upbringing. Bithiah's care for Moses was not just about providing physical comfort. She nurtured him emotionally, building in him the confidence and strength that would one day help him face Pharaoh and demand the freedom of his people. Although Moses was raised as an Egyptian prince, Bithiah's love transcended cultural and ethnic barriers. She taught him about leadership, compassion, and justice, values that would later shape his role as a leader of the Israelites. The bond between Bithiah and Moses was unique. Despite knowing that he wasn't her biological son, Bithiah treated Moses as though he were her own flesh and blood. This speaks volumes about her character and her ability to love without limits. She didn't allow societal norms or expectations to dictate how she should feel about Moses. Instead, her heart guided her actions, showing that love can overcome even the most ingrained prejudices. Bithiah's role in Moses' life was pivotal. While many may focus on Moses' later achievements, it was Bithiah who provided the foundation for his success. Her decision to raise him as an Egyptian prince gave him access to resources and knowledge that would be critical in the future. Without Bithiah's influence, Moses may never have been equipped to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. Her nurturing and protection were essential to his development as a leader. Interestingly, Bithiah's story also reminds us of the power of adoption. She chose to bring Moses into her life, not out of obligation, but out of love. Her decision to raise him as her own is a beautiful reflection of God's love for humanity, adopting us into his family despite our imperfections. In this way, Bithiah's actions serve as a symbol of grace, mercy, and unconditional love. Bithiah's decision to raise Moses set the stage for the Exodus story. Her willingness to defy Pharaoh's orders and give Moses a life of privilege and education was a turning point in biblical history. She didn't just save a baby, she nurtured a future leader, someone who would grow to become a beacon of hope for an entire nation. Her story teaches us that the choices we make in the present can have a profound impact on the future. As Moses grew up in the palace, his true identity remained hidden from most of the world. Bithiah knew he was a Hebrew, but she chose to keep this fact a secret, allowing Moses to be raised as an Egyptian prince. This decision was vital for his survival, as revealing his Hebrew heritage could have led to dire consequences. Yet, despite being raised in the luxury of Egyptian royalty, Moses' heart would eventually turn toward his people, the Hebrews. This internal conflict was something Moses would struggle with for years. The tension between Moses' Egyptian upbringing and his Hebrew roots was not lost on Bithiah. She must have realized that one day, Moses would discover the truth about his heritage. However, Bithiah continued to protect him, shielding him from the harsh reality of Pharaoh's decrees against the Hebrews. It was a delicate balance, raising a Hebrew child in the heart of an empire that sought to oppress his people. But Bithiah's love for Moses never wavered, even as the complexity of his identity grew. Moses' hidden identity was a central part of his journey. He was a man caught between two worlds, raised as an Egyptian, but destined to lead the Hebrews. Bithiah's role in this is significant because she allowed Moses to grow up in an environment where he could learn the skills and knowledge necessary to fulfill his divine mission. Had he grown up as a Hebrew slave, his path might have been very different. Bithiah's decision to keep his identity hidden was not just an act of protection, but also an act of preparation for his future role. The moment Moses discovered his Hebrew identity must have been a profound one. It was a revelation that likely caused him to question everything he had ever known. How could he, an Egyptian prince, be part of a people enslaved by the very kingdom that had raised him? Bithiah's decision to keep his identity a secret for so long allowed Moses to grow into adulthood without the weight of this knowledge. Yet, when the time came, Moses would be ready to face his true destiny. Bithiah's role in keeping Moses' identity hidden was not just about protecting him. It was also about giving him time. Time to grow, time to learn, and time to become the man he needed to be before embracing his true calling. In many ways, Bithiah was preparing Moses for a future he couldn't yet see. Her wisdom in keeping this secret allowed Moses to step into his role as the leader of the Israelites at just the right moment in history. The hidden identity of Moses also serves as a reminder that sometimes the most important truths are revealed in their own time. Bithiah understood this. She knew that the time would come when Moses would have to confront his heritage, but she allowed him the space to grow into his identity at his own pace. Her story reminds us that timing is everything, and that sometimes protecting a truth for a season is the wisest course of action. Bithiah's story is not only one of courage and compassion, but also of faith. While she was raised in the heart of Egyptian royalty, surrounded by the worship of many gods, her encounter with Moses would ultimately connect her to the God of Israel. Though the Bible doesn't give us a detailed account of her spiritual journey, it's clear that her actions reveal a heart open to the divine. In choosing to save Moses, Bithiah was aligning herself with God's greater plan, even if she didn't fully understand it at the time. Bithiah's faith was subtle, but it was there. She knew the Hebrews were a people oppressed by her father's rule, and yet she chose to show mercy and love to one of their children. This act of defiance wasn't just a political or social statement, it was a spiritual one. Bithiah's compassion for Moses can be seen as a reflection of God's own compassion for his people. In many ways, she became an instrument of God's will, even though she was part of the Egyptian royal family. It's fascinating to think about how Bithiah's faith may have grown over time. Watching Moses mature, witnessing his inner conflict between his Egyptian upbringing and Hebrew heritage, must have raised questions in her own heart. Did Bithiah come to believe in the God of Israel through her connection to Moses? While we may not have all the answers, we can imagine that her decision to save him was not just an act of motherly love, but also a response to a divine calling she couldn't ignore. Bithiah's role in Moses' life was critical, not just because she saved him, but because she played a part in God's redemptive plan for the Israelites. Her faith, though not explicitly mentioned in Scripture, is evident in her actions. She defied Pharaoh's orders, protected a Hebrew child, and raised him as her own. These are not the actions of someone simply going through the motions of life. They are the actions of a woman who felt a deeper connection to something greater. Bithiah's faith also serves as a powerful reminder that God can work through anyone, regardless of their background or upbringing. She was an Egyptian princess, raised in a culture that worshipped false gods, yet she became part of the story of Israel's deliverance. Her story shows that God's plans are not limited by human expectations or societal norms. Bithiah's faith, whether she fully realized it or not, was instrumental in bringing about the salvation of an entire nation. In the end, Bithiah's faith in the God of Israel can be seen in her willingness to risk everything for Moses. Her courage, compassion, and quiet faith played a crucial role in shaping the future of the Hebrew people. Through her actions, we see a glimpse of how God can use even the most unlikely individuals to fulfill his purposes. Bithiah's legacy is one of faith in action, and her story continues to inspire those who seek to follow God's calling, no matter the cost. Bithiah's connection to Moses places her directly within the larger narrative of the Exodus, one of the most significant events in biblical history. While Moses is often celebrated as the leader who brought the Israelites out of Egypt, it's essential to recognize the role Bithiah played in making this possible. Without her courageous decision to save and raise Moses, the story of the Exodus might have unfolded quite differently. Bithiah's act of compassion set the stage for the deliverance of an entire nation. Though Bithiah was not on the front lines with Moses when he confronted Pharaoh, her influence was evident in his life. She had provided him with the tools to navigate the complexities of Egyptian royalty, knowledge of their customs, and the ability to understand the mindset of the very people he would later challenge. Bithiah's nurturing love and protection equipped Moses with the strength and confidence to stand before Pharaoh and demand the freedom of his people. Her actions were foundational to Moses' journey as a leader. Bithiah's role in the Exodus story also extends to the spiritual realm. By saving Moses, she inadvertently became part of God's plan to liberate his people from slavery. Bithiah, though an Egyptian princess, demonstrated the kind of faith and courage that aligned with God's purposes. Her decision to save Moses wasn't just a moment of human compassion. It was a pivotal moment in the unfolding of divine providence. God used her actions to ensure that his chosen leader would survive and thrive. In many ways, Bithiah's legacy in the Exodus story is one of quiet but profound impact. While she may not have led the Israelites out of Egypt or parted the Red Sea, her role was just as critical. Without Bithiah, there would have been no Moses, no leader to stand against Pharaoh, and no one to guide the Israelites through the wilderness. Her story reminds us that even those who work behind the scenes can play a vital role in God's larger plan. It's also important to consider how Bithiah's relationship with Moses may have shaped his understanding of compassion and justice. Growing up under the care of a woman who defied her own father's cruel decree must have influenced Moses' sense of right and wrong. Bithiah's example of risking everything to do what was right likely planted seeds in Moses that would later blossom into his determination to free his people. In this way, Bithiah's role in the Exodus is both personal and far-reaching. Bithiah's part in the Exodus story is a testament to the idea that sometimes the most significant contributions come from those who choose love and compassion over fear and compliance. Her decision to save Moses was not just about one life, it was about the destiny of an entire nation. Through her courage, Bithiah became part of a much greater story, one that continues to inspire generations of believers today. Bithiah's legacy in biblical history is one that often goes unnoticed, yet her impact is undeniable. As the woman who saved and raised Moses, Bithiah played a crucial role in shaping the future of the Hebrew people. Though the Bible doesn't provide an extensive account of her life, her actions speak volumes. Bithiah's legacy is one of compassion, courage, and faith, qualities that have left a lasting imprint on the story of God's people. One of the most remarkable aspects of Bithiah's legacy is how she bridged the gap between two worlds, Egyptian royalty and Hebrew faith. She was an Egyptian princess, yet her heart was drawn toward the God of Israel. Her decision to save Moses is a testament to the fact that God can use anyone, regardless of their background, to fulfill his purposes. Bithiah's life serves as a reminder that God's plan is not limited by cultural or social boundaries. Bithiah's legacy also extends to her influence on Moses. By raising him in the Egyptian palace, she provided him with the education and resources that would later help him lead the Israelites out of bondage. Her nurturing love and protection were critical in shaping Moses into the man he became. Bithiah's role as a mother figure, despite the dangers it posed to her, laid the foundation for Moses to fulfill his divine calling. In this sense, her legacy lives on through him. Even though Bithiah may not be as widely known as other biblical figures, her story continues to inspire. She represents the quiet but powerful influence of those who choose to act with courage and compassion, even in the face of danger. Bithiah's willingness to defy Pharaoh's orders and raise a Hebrew child as her own shows that true greatness often comes from making difficult, selfless decisions. Her legacy is one that encourages us to look beyond our circumstances and act with love and faith. Bithiah's story also highlights the importance of unseen heroes in the Bible. While Moses is celebrated for leading the Israelites to freedom, Bithiah's role behind the scenes was just as essential. Without her, there would have been no Moses to lead the people. Her legacy reminds us that even those who work in the background can have a profound impact on the world. Bithiah's actions are a testament to the fact that God often works through unlikely individuals to accomplish his plans. In the broader context of biblical history, Bithiah's legacy is a symbol of hope and redemption. Her choice to save Moses, despite the risks, set in motion a chain of events that would lead to the liberation of an entire nation. Bithiah's story is a reminder that God's grace extends to all, regardless of their background, and that he can use anyone to fulfill his purposes. Her legacy continues to inspire us to act with courage, faith, and love, trusting that our actions, however small, can have a lasting impact. Bithiah's life offers many profound lessons that continue to resonate with us today. First and foremost, her story teaches us the power of compassion. When Bithiah found Moses in the basket, she could have easily followed Pharaoh's decree and allowed the child to perish. Instead, she chose to act out of love, demonstrating that true compassion can transcend fear and societal expectations. Bithiah's example shows us that doing the right thing often requires courage and a willingness to defy the norms of the time. Another important lesson from Bithiah's life is the idea of faith in action. Bithiah may not have fully understood the God of Israel when she saved Moses, but her actions aligned with his plans. Sometimes we are called to act before we fully understand the purpose behind it. Bithiah's story encourages us to trust in the process, knowing that even small acts of kindness and courage can play a role in God's greater plan. Her faith, though quiet, was evident in her decisions and the risks she took for Moses. Bithiah's story also teaches us about the importance of nurturing those around us. By raising Moses as her own, Bithiah provided him with the tools and education he would later need to fulfill his divine mission. Her care for him went beyond mere survival. She equipped him to become the leader God had called him to be. In the same way, we are reminded of the impact we can have on others by investing in their growth and development, even if we don't see the results immediately. A key takeaway from Bithiah's life is the value of standing up for what is right, even when it's difficult. Bithiah defied her father's orders and risked her position as a princess to save a Hebrew child. This act of bravery is a reminder that true leadership often requires us to make tough decisions and take risks for the sake of others. Bithiah's courage in the face of danger inspires us to be bold in our own lives, especially when standing up for justice and mercy. Another lesson we learn from Bithiah is the power of love to bridge divides. She was an Egyptian princess, yet she raised Moses, a Hebrew, as her own son. This act of love broke down the barriers between two vastly different cultures and showed that love can transcend differences. Bithiah's story reminds us that love has the power to unite us, regardless of our backgrounds, and that it can lead to transformation in the lives of others. Finally, Bithiah's life teaches us the importance of legacy. Though her role may seem small compared to other biblical figures, her decision to save and raise Moses had a ripple effect that changed the course of history. Bithiah's story reminds us that our actions, no matter how small they may seem at the time, can have a lasting impact on the world. Her legacy encourages us to live with purpose, knowing that the choices we make today can shape the future for generations to come. Bithiah's actions continue to resonate with us, even thousands of years after her story took place. Her decision to save Moses reminds us that individual acts of courage and compassion can have far-reaching effects. In a world where it's easy to feel powerless in the face of injustice, Bithiah's story serves as a reminder that we all have the ability to make a difference. Her choice to defy Pharaoh and save a Hebrew child encourages us to stand up for what is right, even when the odds are against us. The way Bithiah nurtured Moses also offers a timeless lesson on the importance of investing in others. By raising Moses as her own, Bithiah ensured that he had the education, resources, and support he needed to become the leader he was destined to be. Today, her story challenges us to think about how we can help shape the future by mentoring and supporting those around us. Whether through parenting, teaching, or simply offering a helping hand, Bithiah's legacy of nurturing lives on. Bithiah's story also speaks to the power of love to overcome division. In a time when Egyptians and Hebrews were deeply divided, Bithiah chose to bridge that gap by adopting a Hebrew child. Her actions show us that love knows no boundaries. It can cross cultural, ethnic, and social divides. In today's world, where division often seems to be the norm, Bithiah's example reminds us that love and compassion can break down barriers and bring people together. Another way Bithiah's actions impact us today is through the idea of faith in the unseen. Bithiah couldn't have known the full extent of Moses' destiny when she saved him from the Nile, but she acted in faith, trusting that her decision was the right one. Her story encourages us to take steps of faith in our own lives, even when we can't see the entire picture. Sometimes, the most significant acts of faith are those that come without a clear understanding of the future, but with a trust in something greater. Bithiah's courage in defying Pharaoh also speaks to the importance of standing against injustice. Today, we are often confronted with situations that require us to choose between compliance and standing up for what is right. Bithiah's story reminds us that taking a stand, even when it's difficult or dangerous, is a powerful act. Her courage inspires us to act with integrity, even when it goes against the prevailing culture or authority. Finally, Bithiah's story impacts us by showing the long-term effects of seemingly small decisions. Her choice to save Moses didn't just impact her life or his, it changed the course of history. Today, we are reminded that our actions, no matter how small, can have lasting consequences. Bithiah's legacy encourages us to live with intentionality, knowing that the choices we make today can shape the future for generations to come. Bithiah's story is a powerful reminder that our actions, no matter how small they seem, can have a lasting impact. Through her courage and compassion, she helped shape the future of an entire nation. Her decision to defy her father's cruel decree and save Moses teaches us that standing up for what is right often comes at a cost, but it is a cost worth paying. Today, we are challenged to live with the same courage and love that Bithiah demonstrated, knowing that our choices can change the world around us. As we reflect on Bithiah's life, I encourage you to think about the moments in your own life where you've been called to take a stand. How can you show love and compassion to those around you, even when it goes against the grain? How can you be bold in the face of fear? Just like Bithiah, you have the power to make a difference in the lives of others. Before we close, let's take a moment to pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for the example of Bithiah, who showed us the power of love and courage. Help us to live with the same boldness, trusting in your plan for our lives. Guide us to be instruments of your will, even when it means standing against the current. Bless everyone watching this, and may we all be reminded of the impact our actions can have. In Jesus' name, amen. If you've been touched by Bithiah's story, let me know in the comments by typing the word courage. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any more inspiring stories like this one. Your journey to living with greater courage starts now.